Now we'll turn to talk about the golden rule graphically. And the first thing that I want to do here is just look at this graph for a second and understand what each of these lines represents. So let's just pick an arbitrary value for K and go all the way up to the blue line. So you notice the blue line is just the production function. It's Z times K to the alpha. This purple line is savings rate times the production function. And then the red line is just the outflow, the amount of capital that gets lost through population growth and through depreciation. So this distance here, we can, roughly speaking, just call it depreciation. We know that also includes population growth. This vertical distance then is what we have called net investment. So that is savings less depreciation. So this total vertical amount here is either savings or investment. And then if we go up here to the blue line, we have output. Well, we know that output equals consumption plus investment. So that means that this vertical distance here must be consumption. So what the golden rule is all about is choosing a steady state capital stock, or equivalently, choosing a steady state savings rate, we'll call it SGR for golden rule, that maximizes this vertical distance here. It maximizes consumption in steady state. Now, if you stare at this graph for a second, it should look a lot like the graph that we saw when we were asking about a firm choosing labor to maximize profit. Remember, in that case, we had a straight line that was given by the wage. So this thing was W times N. Down on this axis, we had N instead of capital. And then we had this production function, which looked a lot like this. I mean, we wrote it as ZF of Kn. And so what we did to maximize profit was we wanted to find the point, the choice of N, that made the distance between this, which is the total revenue curve, and the total cost curve, the greatest. And we're going to do exactly the same thing, because if you look at this for a second, you'll see that maximizing the distance between the blue line and the red line is going to be exactly the same algebraic or geometric operation as maximizing profits for the firm. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take this n plus delta line, or this line with the slope n plus delta, we're going to move it out and find the point where it's just tangent to the production function. And that will give us then maximized consumption per capita in steady state. And then we can back all. And then once we have that point, we can then back out what savings rate will deliver KGR, the golden rule level of steady state capital. And what you can see here is this line, the slope of the production function is just the marginal product of capital. And that is equal to n plus delta, the slope of the original red line. And so that's our golden rule for choosing the capital stock and therefore the savings rate. So how do we interpret this golden rule? Well, first, we're going to choose steady state capital so that marginal product of capital capital equals n plus delta. But now we can think about the marginal product as really what the marginal benefit is of additional capital. So that comes from asking how much does output rise when you increase capital. But then n plus delta tells us something about what the cost is of maintaining that capital. So this is exactly analogous to what we did earlier when we just looked at what the steady state was. So we can ask how much of that additional output has to go into savings and therefore not into consumption. So then the golden rule is just marginal benefit equals marginal cost. These are backwards. If the marginal product of capital is greater than n plus delta, then it must mean that you are underinvesting because the marginal benefit exceeds the marginal cost, and therefore you can increase consumption by raising capital. As you raise capital, then that's going to bring the marginal product of capital back down until it's equal to that. And then the reverse is that if the marginal product of capital is less than n plus delta, then you must be overinvesting. You've done too much. And then you can increase consumption by reducing the capital stock.